I am happy that all the officers have been arrested. My father should have not been killed like this. We deserve justice. That's all I have to say.
What about the comments from US Secretary of Defense Mark Esper, David, who spoke out about the Insurrection Act today? What's he had to say?
Really interesting comments. He has taken a very different line to that of his boss, the President of the United States, Donald Trump. He says that he does not believe that active military troops, or soldiers, if you like, should be used to try to quell these protests at this time. Now, from reports inside the White House, Donald Trump was furious at this. There was even some scuttlebutt that he may end up losing his job, as others have. That does not appear to be the case. But he's not the only one who's spoken out strongly against this. James Mattis served for 2 years under Donald Trump and has been critical of him since he left that post. But the strongest criticism that he's had against the president has come today. Very, very firm comments indeed. But let's just hear what Mark Esper, the current Defense Secretary, had to say.
The option to use active duty forces in a law enforcement role should only be used as a matter of last resort and only in the most urgent and dire of situations. We are not in one of those situations now. I do not support invoking the Insurrection Act.
Now, it's important to note that 40% of America's active military are African American people. So you can see the delicate act that the Defense Secretary and indeed the top military brass have to walk here. Of course, they have to follow orders from the President, but they don't want a revolt in their ranks. So we've seen some very interesting messages go out from some of that top brass to the troops, suggesting that they won't be doing anything that is against the interest of America, and pointing out that in America there is a right to gather peacefully on the streets.
And the curfew in Washington, D.C. has been set for the last couple of nights, David, hasn't it, at 7 p.m., but I understand it's been pushed back tonight?
It has been pushed back to 11 p.m, so that is, I'm losing track, that's in a couple of hours from now. The reason for that is the Mayor, Muriel Bowser, believed that there was no violence last night or vandalism, and so she decided that it was okay to move the curfew back. So that just backs up what I was saying earlier about the shift in the protest movement. There's a feeling that things are being channeled into a different direction. Whether that'll lead to any meaningful change and what that change would look like is still very much an open question. In fact, it's still largely a leaderless group, and that's what a couple of the protesters we've spoken to today have pointed out. There are no leaders at this point like there were in the 60s, for example, with Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X and Black Panther and other groups. Right now, there's no one really standing up to take that role. We did see a young gentleman who really riled up the crowd a little earlier, even singing to the crowd and giving messages, but there's kind of a position vacant for anyone that would want to step up with a powerful voice to lead this movement. They haven't quite stepped up just yet, although Barack Obama's comments today were pretty meaningful to this crowd as well.
All right, David, thank you. And apologies for the language used in one of those placards there during live shots of Washington, D.C. The 2 Washington police officers who attacked 2 members of an Australian news crew during protests in the US Capitol have been assigned to administrative duties while an investigation into the incident takes place. The Channel 7 reporter and camera operator were covering protests outside the White House when they were assaulted by police during a surge in officers against protesters.